the 80-20 principle is absolutely at play here. 80% of the deals are done by 20% of the brokers. So, I learned the business through doing this, and I was blessed and grateful. I am grateful to have been able to achieve success through this experience. And it gave me an understanding of what can go right, what can go wrong, and all these things, and learn from others in the same capacity. But if I'm going to scale my time, if I'm going to put a great team on the field, so to speak, this is the next step in the evolution.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to Weiss Advice. I'm your host, Yona Weiss. If you didn't know that already, now you do. Remember my voice because you're going to hear it a lot. I guarantee you're going to love this show, especially with today's guest, Tyler Chesser, based out of Louisville, Kentucky, co-founder of CF Capital, host of the Elevate podcast, which, by the way, you guys should check out. Okay, so stop Weiss Advice at the end of this episode, and then go on to Elevate podcast. You're not going to be disappointed. Okay, it's just out of this world. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. Tyler, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. You know what? We're sitting here together. I feel like we're in the same room, but we're not. And I can feel your energy, your good energy. We're bringing good things to the table today. So I'm excited for a great conversation.
Awesome. Yeah. And, just a little bit about, you're a multifamily investor. You're also a commercial real estate broker, right? Louisville ranked as like the top broker in the city, I think, for multifamily.
I don't know about that.
Something like that. Like one of the best. Okay. And, you're doing amazing things. So I appreciate you taking the time and sharing with me, this time over here, because I love talking to you, and I think what you're doing and the message that you have with the Elevate podcast and the Elevate Nation and all that good stuff, it's really driving that positive energy and that growth mindset that just attracts me and tons of other people to that. You just it's kind of magnifying.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I've been going through a bit of an evolution, actually evolving away from the brokerage world, which is pretty crazy to even say out loud. And I've been really going through this evolution for a bit now. And the reason why is because I feel like I'm leaving good or maybe even great to go to great or maybe even excellent or extraordinary in many ways, and growing sort of the CF Capital footprint, as well as what we're doing with Elevate and coaching folks for peak performance. And so, I'm excited. I mean, honestly, my goal, really, my kind of overarching mission is to help millions of people really elevate to a life without limits. And what that means to me is, rather than being, tolerating your life, rather than just plugging it in and having no inspiration and thinking that nothing else is possible, rather than living a miserable life, you can actually live a life of joy and excitement through constantly investing in yourself and growing and being willing to grow, being willing to change and adapt and pivot in so many ways, personally, as well as, you and I both, we love real estate, and we believe
Right.
that it's a practical sort of solution towards creating cash flow and wealth and, all the tax benefits, of course, which you talk about so frequently. But I mean, that really pulls me out of bed every morning. And I mean that, because there's of course times where I'm tired and, I feel overwhelmed, but I'm also pulled by this vision because I believe in it so much. So I'm excited to share that with you and have a great discussion today.
Absolutely. And, and for all just complete transparency, I'm going to steal some of Tyler's questions from his podcast that he asks his guests, because they're just incredible questions. And he has a list that just incredible. So just, I'm not that smart and coming up with these awesome questions on my own. Just complete transparency there. Anyways, I wanted to ask you, because you're talking about this, growth mindset and this, ability to this self-improvement that you're very big on, and helping others to do that as a coach as well. What's one thing that, kind of drives you to, obviously you just mentioned what your goal is and kind of what your vision is, but on a daily basis, what's the thing in your personal growth that kind of pushes you?
I mean, the central theme to my personal growth is curiosity. At the end of the day, I'm just a curious person. And the more that I read, or the more that I have a discussion with someone like yourself, or meet someone new, or listen to a podcast, or be on a podcast, or interview someone else on my podcast, the more I want to know, the more questions that I have, and the more information gap that this uncovers for me. And I don't know if this is maybe just something that was given to me, as a gift, but I just have a deep sense of curiosity and I just want to know more. And even before we started really kind of recording for the show, and maybe we were recording, so who knows what will be out in the ether after the show. But one of the things we talked about is that it gets a little old to talk about real estate. Obviously there's always something new to learn there, and so there's
Right.
always a new challenge to grow, which I do love that. But I love learning about within myself, how am I going to handle stress, how am I going to lead others, how am I going to understand someone else's psychology, how am I going to understand how history repeats itself, or perhaps even rhymes, right? Like
Right.
we're dealing with a pandemic right now. A lot of people say, hey, this has never happened before, this is unprecedented. Of course it is in many capacities, but it's also happened before. So what can we do to study history and what happened then, and how may we apply lessons learned from history to be successful now and to create a greater life? And so I don't know, I'm just
Yeah.
super curious, and I
Sure.
know that whenever I learn something new, I know that I can apply that and I can live a greater life and I can give back to others with a higher capacity. So I don't know. I'd say that's really the central theme to why I'm so obsessed with growing myself, is because I've learned that my curiosity not only, really kind of takes me to that next step, that's maybe it's like a divine purpose. My curiosity is taking me
Hmm.
a path that I'm not consciously aware of why I'm going down this path. I'm just interested in it,
Right.
but it seems to really continuously pay off. So
Yeah,
that's
and the more
that's what
you
I say
learn,
about
you meet new people and you talk to new people, it just kind of piques that curiosity in so many new ways. So,
it.
like you have this podcast, you're interviewing people on a regular basis, all different walks of life, right? All kinds of people. So, on that note, like who's the most interesting, or maybe not the most interesting person you've interviewed, but the most interesting interview that you've had?
Mm. That's good. I like that. I really like that question, actually. You're making me think here. And I promise that this isn't maybe a little bit of recency bias. Maybe it is. But I did just interview John Brinkus from the show Sports Science. I don't know if you remember the show Sports Science.
No.
It was a show on ESPN for 12 years or so.
Okay.
And he hosted the show, created the show, but he also, produced it through ABC. And he's well known for many other things, but that's sort of what he's most known for. And I honestly didn't expect it to be as impactful of a discussion as it was, because sometimes you have a high expectation for really big name guests, and not that he was a big name guest, but I actually didn't, when I heard his name, I didn't know who he was until I looked him up. I'm like, oh, of course I know John Brinkus. And as we were having this discussion, it's like, wow, we just connected so much on this curiosity thing. Like he applied his learnings and his desire to learn more about science, and is also his desire to understand peak performers in the athletic realm. And it was just really cool to have a discussion on that, and how can we apply that for ourselves to be peak performers,
Hmm.
not only in life but also in real estate and in business, and
Right.
have just a deep sense of curiosity. So it kind of goes back to the first question as well, but I don't know, that's how I'd answer that one.
That's cool. No, that's awesome. And I'm gonna check that out after we finish, because now you piqued my curiosity. So
Yes,
I'm
not
gonna
out
get,
yet, not out yet,
oh, it's
but
not
it
out.
will be
Okay.
soon. Yeah.
So hopefully by the time this airs, it
Mhm.
probably will be out. Let's
Exactly.
let's do that.
Yeah.
And we'll put that in the show notes over here. Yeah, for anyone to check that episode out as well.
Yeah.
So what, and we could just go on. I don't want to like steal all your questions, but they're such good questions. And so one question that really I remember when you asked it to me, like it was like, wow, that's a big one. And this really speaks to the personal development and the aspect that all of us have, that we're kind of afraid of, right? Which is failure, right? And a
Mm.
lot of us have this fear of failure. And some people, a lot of people say, I'm not afraid to fail. It's their learning
Yeah.
experiences and their lessons. But the truth is, when you're in the moment, no one likes it. Okay.
No.
And it would just kind of be ignoring the truth, or lying to yourself. I guess that's a better way of saying it. If you say you actually enjoy the process of failing. So what's a failure that you can think of that set you up for a later success?
Man, I couldn't agree more with what you said. And by the way, thank you for asking me a question that I like to ask. And the reason why I asked this question, first of all, is because you and I both know that failure is almost inevitable in
Yeah, of
many different capacities, and
course.
it's what is required sometimes to reach a greater success. And the reason why I asked the question in that way as well is, how did it set you up for a later success? Is because it's like what Napoleon Hill says in Think and Grow Rich, is that every adversity or failure is a seed for a later success. And if you really frame it in that capacity, that can give you the opportunity for that later success.
Absolutely.
And I agree wholeheartedly that during the failure, it's the worst. Like, you don't care that it's setting you up for some later success. So, one thing that I typically like, really the first thing that comes to my mind is the first real estate deal that I ever invested in was an epic failure for really the first probably 2 years of the deal. I mean, it was negative cash flow. It was total mismanagement by myself, total miscalculation of renovation, under appreciation for the fact that many more things could go wrong than I anticipated. Like, the first time I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I never would have thought that all of these disasters could happen, because it sounds so simple. You just buy the property, people pay rent, and then you pay your expenses, and then the rest, is your cash flow. Well, guess what? It's not that simple. And it definitely wasn't that simple then. But I look back and say that that was a seed for a later success, because I think if I would have hit a home run there, I would have gotten reckless, and I would have just continued to buy more and more and more
Mm,
early on. And I would have made those mistakes on a larger scale.
right.
So the fact that I did lose money, time healed the wounds, but I would have lost a lot more money if I would have gotten, a little bit cocky or overzealous. And so, it also caused me to really get very particular and very specific in the fact that, worst case scenario is possible. And when that happens, can you live with it? And what does that look like? And so, stress testing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, and I love that. The fact that you're so right. Like when we read about stuff, especially Rich Dad Poor or whatever real estate books, and everyone's talking about all the mistakes you can make and all the things, no one actually thinks that they're going to make those mistakes.
No.
But just like you said, if you're taking them as a lesson and you're moving forward, and like you say, making it turning it into a success. And I just interviewed Rod Cleef recently, and the way he puts it, he calls his failures seminars.
Yep.
That's how he reframes them. That they were huge, and he called it like huge, monumental seminars. Losing $50 million, right, is of your money and other people's money is that's a huge failure. Okay,
Yeah.
and but if you learn from it and you figure out what the mistakes were and how the risks that you took, etc., you can learn from that, you can grow from that, you can create success out of the adversity until you're looking at the big picture, and instead of focusing on the failures. So that's awesome. No, obviously that was not fun at the time, but you're on to bigger and better things because of it. Okay, so you guys
Absolutely.
are doing deals now, looking for bigger deals. And I love the fact that you've kind of pivoted from the brokerage into the actual investing and managing more full time, even though, because I think a lot of people start that way. So you're definitely not alone on that road, because it's very easy to break into becoming a real estate broker,
Totally.
right? It's not easy to do. It's not easy to be successful, as you know, right? But it's
Oh,
very
yeah.
easy to break into it. And that's a great kind of entry point for a lot of people, even though I'd say, I don't know the exact percentages, but probably like 70 to 80% of those people that do it are not successful in it.
Yeah.
Um, Nevertheless, of those that are successful, realize that they're making a lot of money, but they're squandering it away, or they're not saving it. And the smart ones, like you, take that money they're making and also simultaneously invest that money into real estate, so that they'll have that income coming even if they don't close deals.
Yes, absolutely. And, the 80/20 principle is absolutely at play here. 80% of the deals are done by 20% of the brokers. So, I learned the business through doing this, and I was blessed and grateful. I am grateful to have been able to achieve success through this experience. And it gave me an understanding of what can go right, what can go wrong, and all these things, and learn from others in the same capacity. But if I'm going to scale my time, if I'm going to put a great team on the field, so to speak, this is the next step in the evolution. And so, I'm just always thinking back towards what's my mission. My mission is to help millions of people elevate to a life without limits, and real estate is a central component to that, in addition to the personal growth and the constant and never ending improvement. So kind of marrying those things together, it's like, all right, am I doing that as a broker? And perhaps to a very small degree, but I'm able to impact so many more people when we crowdfund and we bring in, many different investors to acquire, significant communities, and we employ great people. We impact those communities that we invest, and we improve those communities operationally, physically, all these things, as well as, we create opportunities for more people. So
Sure.
that's kind of the look behind the curtain there on that decision.
No, and that's awesome. And it's a process, right? I mean, this you've been doing it for a few years already, right? In terms
Yeah.
of investing as well as real estate. So it's kind of is that metamorphosis is what I'm
That's it.
looking for. That was
That's
the
it.
word.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the other thing too, is that the metamorphosis or whatever it is, it's painful too. I mean, there's times where you're trying to shed your identity to become this new identity. And I feel like, a lot of times people say, wow, you've really changed. And I think about it and I say, well, isn't that a good thing? I mean, I want to change every
Hmm.
single day. I have to recreate myself. I have to become something new. And so, that's the same personally or professionally. And so we're continuously evolving. As long as I'm leading with a giving heart, it's painful though. I mean, because when you evolve, you make mistakes and you fail. And it's like you also don't know what's around that corner. So being an entrepreneur, I know many of the entrepreneurs that listen are saying, yeah, I get that for sure. And we have to be ready to adapt,
Yeah.
because hey, you know what? We may have a global pandemic, or we may have, cultural revolutions happening. So what are we going to do to be nimble and pivot, and, not only personally, but professionally?
So going back to your questions, who are your role models? Because obviously you couldn't have done this on your own and just kind of figured this out of the blue. Like this is what I want to do. But in terms of this process that you're doing now, do you have any role models?
I mean, there's a lot of role models in the real estate business that I would point to. But before I would do that, I'd really point to, guys like Tony Robbins. I mean, I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan. I think that, like probably Rod Cleef said on your show, is that 80% of your success and everything is the psychology, and 20% is the mechanics. And I really focus on that. I mean, I'm always trying to think, well, what sort of subconscious limiting beliefs do I have, or
Hmm.
that others may have, and how can I speak to that, and how can I serve not only myself but someone else, and have an understanding of that? And what can I do to perform at a peak level? How can I get into a peak state? How can I show up with a conversation with Yona and be really present with him, and really think through of what can I do to serve him and
Right.
be a good steward of my own energy to bring to you. So, an individual like Tony Robbins is somebody who's dedicated his life and his work towards that. And
Yeah.
so I'd love to impact other people in a similar way. So I definitely look at Tony Robbins as a great role model. From a real estate perspective, I mean, a guy like Sam Zell is an absolute monster in this business. He's an amazing guy. I also look at, Steven Schwartzman as an individual who's really been a beast in this
Yeah.
business, and somebody who's really thought bigger. I mean, if you want to think about, the guy's first fund was $1 billion,
Yeah.
and
People don't
he's like,
talk
I don't.
about Blackstone and Steven Schwartzman. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't get as much media press as it should.
I know. Why not? I have no
They're a
idea why.
monster. I mean, they're like colossally bigger than anyone else in the space whatsoever. I mean, they're like
Absolutely.
$650 billion of assets or something. Like
Totally.
that's
It's
crazy.
crazy. And it really is because he started by thinking big. And he went through an evolution. If you read his book, What It Takes, I mean, he evolved from, the pressures of being with Lehman Brothers and them sort of doing some things that he didn't feel was right. And he was a partner, and he said, look, I'm out of here. And he created this thing in Wall Street. All the other Wall Street people are like, what are you doing? You're this outsider now. And obviously look at what's happened now. And I think of other guys like Phil Knight. I mean, Phil Knight, who is just so relentless in building this iconic brand, that he just followed his curiosity. He followed his passions. And then
Right.
it became, I've got a Nike shirt on right now. It's amazing. So those are, I mean, I have a lot of role models. And another one, I know that you're like, please stop talking.
No,
Ben Franklin is like my spirit animal. I mean, if you ever read the biography of Ben Franklin, maybe you'll understand. But he is an amazing individual, so creative, and obviously did so many things in his life.
Oh, that's incredible. There's so many. I mean, obviously the list could go on because we've been shaped by so many people throughout our lives. But no, it's impressive when you think about these people, and especially when you're role models and you're looking at people that are like 10, 10,000 times, like bigger
Yeah.
than where
Yes.
you're at, which that, it
Totally.
says a lot about the person. Like when you're looking at the people you look up to are not just someone that's like a little bit more successful than you, has been doing it like a little bit longer than you. No, let's see those people who have like shot it out of the park, out of a different
Yeah.
galaxy. And those are the people I want to have as a role model, model myself after.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to think big, I think I go back to this again. It all starts in your mind. And if I'm going to think, I might as well think big, right?
Right.
Because if we want to do great things, it's not selfish of us to think big because then we can impact more people. Ultimately, that's what it's all about, is doing the right thing for other people. Of course, we want to live a great life while
Hmm.
we're here as well. But I don't know. I just, that's kind of my big philosophy is let's just think big, add a zero to your thinking.
Yeah. So the last final question of yours, but I'm giving you the credit for it because these are great questions. Everyone's got to go listen to Elevate podcast because these are awesome questions. He asks his own guests. But what's something you're getting better at saying no to?
Well, I mean, I'm getting better at saying no to brokerage deals. I mean, that's one right now. I mean, I'm sending out a referral agreement right after the show because, I've built a platform where people want to do business with me, which I'm so blessed and grateful to say. But, to leave, good or maybe even great to go to that excellent or extraordinary, I've got to prune some things. And that's an example in business that I say no to. Recently, since we've kind of had this pandemic, there's been much less coffee meetings and lunch meetings. And so that's been easy to say no to, obviously, just
Hmm.
because of the social distancing and everything. But as things potentially, kind of start to open up in certain capacities, we do look at it and say, well, what's the best use of our time? And
Right.
I've been able to say, what, we can probably do this virtually just as effectively, and it saves a lot of time. So I think
Sure.
that's just kind of one
I can
tactical thing
drink a
I've been saying no
coffee, over here. You can drink a coffee over there, and
to. Exactly.
we're having coffee together.
Right.
Like that was someone just told me yesterday. Like they went out for wine on Zoom with their friend. Like, had a glass of wine
Yeah,
together, and just that's awesome. Because it does kind of change our perspective of how we're doing business, how we were doing things, where we're using our time as efficiently as we could have or should have. And now this has kind of shaken our world up. And frankly,
right.
like you said, there's a lot of meetings that don't necessarily have to happen that way. Granted, sitting face to face in person, it doesn't compare. But that being said, there are plenty of meetings that don't have to be in person. And, you don't
Absolutely.
need that element.
I mean, I think the hybrid approach is best. That's kind of what I've learned, is that, you definitely can't replace the in person, but you can also get maybe 97, 98% of the way by sitting here virtually. And I mean, I feel like I'm in the same room as you, but who knows? I mean, it's an interesting process.
Right. That's true. Also, we've never met in person. So that,
Oh, we
that being
haven't,
said,
but we've
that being
done
said,
business together.
right, exactly. But what I'm saying is that, it could be that had we met in person, it might be different than now that we're on Zoom together, since
That's
this has been
true.
our own form of communication.
Right.
Anyways, so it might be different going forward. But I'm going to jump into the final four that we call it, our final four questions we ask every guest. So the first question I ask everyone is, what is the worst job that you ever had?
Ooh, the word. I like it. I like it. Okay. Worst job I've ever had. The first thing that comes to my mind is the very first job I ever had. I literally worked at a car wash, and we'd spray down the cars, we'd prep the cars and send them through, and tell everybody to put it in neutral and all this kind of stuff. And I worked that job also in wintertime, and it was brutal because everybody takes their car to a car wash during wintertime. There's salt all over the cars and everything. And it was just like, I mean, 12 hours straight of just, getting wet and like being cold. It was like, yeah, it's pretty
Oh, that's hard. Yeah, that's very hard. I can hear that. Second question: what's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift? So I'm sure there's been many,
yeah.
but one.
looking at my bookshelf because there's definitely been many. Give me a second. I want to give you a good answer here. Oh,
You-
here we go. Yeah. Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. And the reason why that one was a paradigm shift is because it's about visualizing your future and creating that through, true visualization and having your nerve cells fire together and wire together, creating sort of that feeling towards your goal and your visualization,
Mhm.
and feeling that now, because your brain doesn't know the difference between an experience and a visualized experience, and really kind of creating your future. I learned how to do that through that book. So
Wow.
that's one, but man, I could point to many. I'm a huge book fanatic.
Yeah. I remember one time you posted like you're reading a book a week or something, right? It had like a
Yep.
huge stack. So no, that's awesome. I'm sure there's been many, but that's a great one. The Psycho Cybernetics. I'm going to check that one out, and we'll put that in the show notes. So third question is, what is a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
Ooh, skill or talent that I would like to learn. I would like to speak another language. That's one. I want to, honestly, I'm thinking either Chinese or Spanish, because they're both practical, but it's also, I just feel like, most people speak English around the world if you want to do business with them, but I feel like you can gain a deeper relationship with someone if you can actually kind of come halfway at least and do your best and try to speak another language. So I also think it would be awesome to develop that part of my brain.
It is, and language is an incredible development of your brain. It does incredible things. So I definitely hear that. So awesome, language. We've had that as an answer before with a lot of people. It's either language or playing an instrument. Those are like the two
Hmm.
most popular answers that people give, which is really cool because it shows that people understand that these things affect our mind and our personality in different ways that we don't even know. I mean, do you speak another language besides English?
No, I
You
don't.
know,
Yeah.
when you start to think in another language, that's really when you know that you know the language, when you're fluent, when your mind
Yes.
starts thinking that. And the interesting thing that happens is the biggest way to learn a language, and I speak, three languages fluently, and I know a couple others like, a little bit and get by in. But one of the things that you realize is that there's cultural things and there's like different ways of speech that are totally different in each language. So when you
Hmm.
start to think in those languages, you actually start to become, and change, and
Mm.
it's a whole different way of thinking, which is really cool. So anyways, that's just a segue. So it really does open your mind to a whole new level of thought
I can see that.
and
And I,
growth.
I I would imagine that there's some profound philosophies that you can't really translate, right, in some
For sure.
languages.
For
Yeah,
sure.
I love
Yeah,
that.
100%. Fourth and final question: what does success mean to you?
Success means to me that it's the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, like what Earl Nightingale said, the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. If I set out to do something and I create it, that to me is success. But if someone else has, maybe determined the path for me and they've done something, they've made me create what they've wanted me to create, I think that's perhaps the opposite of what I'm saying here.
Right.
So if I've set out to be a school teacher and I've created a successful life as a school teacher, to me that's success. But everybody has to have their own definition of this, but
Sure.
that would be for me.
For you, and that's exactly what we asked. So you hit it right on the nail. Awesome, Tyler. This has been a tremendous pleasure. Thank you so much for spending the time. It's too short, definitely, but we always try to keep these as short as we can. Get the pack as much value as possible into the small time that we have here. So I appreciate you, and I hope we can speak again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yona. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, definitely be my pleasure. And to all our guests listening, listeners, guests, you're our guest because you're just kind of joining us. Also, because you're our listeners. So each one of you is a guest in your own way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Thank you. Thank you for joining us and participating. And maybe we can make like a big Zoom room so everyone can like watch this, or do this Facebook Live or something in the future. I might try to do that. Anyways, until next time, remember the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? if you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.